Hello, and welcome back to the channel. I know you're here because sleep just won't come easy tonight. Don't worry. I'm here to keep you company with another haunting story from the darker corners of the world. Before we begin, tell me, where did you first hear about this case? And if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, let's dive into tonight's story. No story is more sorrowful than that of Romeo and Juliet, said the Duke in Shakespeare's timeless tragedy. But unlike the fictional lovers who chose their own fate, tonight's young couple faced a very different end, one not of poetry, but of consequence. Our story begins in Missouri with the formation of the Borden family. Michael and Catherine met in school. From the moment he laid eyes on her, Michael was drawn to her blonde, radiant, and always responsive. As teenagers, he tried every innocent method to win her over, helping with homework, offering to walk her home, finding excuses to be near her. Eventually, that friendship blossomed into something deeper. Their love grew naturally, and Michael eventually invited Catherine on a date where he first confessed his feelings. Their connection only deepened, and before long, they were married. Their wedding was a celebration of love and faith, a commitment to stand by one another through all of life's storms. 10 years later, Michael and Catherine moved to Pennsylvania, town known for its deep religious roots and quiet, simple living. Founded by members of the Moravian Church in 1756, Lidditz offered exactly what the Bordens were looking for, a peaceful sanctuary away from the chaos of the modern world. The Bordens were devout Christians. Michael became active in the local church, teaching Sunday school, while Catherine managed the household and supported her husband's work in the community. Michael also worked as a manager at a printing company to support the family financially. Over the years, they were blessed with 5 children, 3 boys, and 2 girls. Like many families in Lidditz, the Bordens believed in raising their children away from worldly distractions. The kids were homeschooled, regularly attended church, and participated in youth groups. To outsiders, the family appeared picture-perfect, respectful, well-mannered, and God-fearing. But beneath the surface of this idyllic household, change was beginning to stir. As their eldest daughter, Kara, entered her teenage years, the cracks in their carefully crafted world began to show. Despite her father's strict rules, Kara started playing soccer, sneaking out to dances, and testing every boundary she had grown up with. Her rebellion shook Michael to the core. Long talks and biblical guidance fell on deaf ears. Then, in 2005, Kara, just 14 years old, met 18-year-old David in a local support group for homeschooled teens. It was an instant spark. What began as innocent chats turned into hours of secret online messaging, then hidden walks and late-night rendezvous. The two were drawn to each other like magnets, bound by youth, passion, and the thrill of the forbidden. Kara, who had once been the obedient daughter, seemed transformed, her heart full, her spirit alight. Her parents noticed the change, but misunderstood it as newfound maturity. In truth, Kara was hiding a secret. She was in love. Knowing her parents would never approve, she concealed the relationship as best she could. But secrets have a way of surfacing. One day, unable to hold it in any longer, Kara confided in her sister, showing her photos and explaining how deeply she and David loved one another. But fear got the better of her sister, who told their mother everything. It wasn't long before Kara's secret unraveled completely. One early morning, as she returned home from another night with David, she quietly slipped into her room only to find her mother waiting. No words were needed. The truth was laid bare. Later that day, her parents sat her down. The message was clear. She was forbidden from seeing David again. They were shocked, devastated that despite all their efforts to shield their children from worldly influences, this had happened. Michael, feeling betrayed and furious, grounded Kara indefinitely, but it was too late. The bond between Kara and David had grown too strong to be undone by punishment. That same morning, David dropped Kara off outside her At 5:30 a.m., they had agreed she would text him once safely inside, but the message never came. Concerned, David called. Message no response. Then, finally, a single message arrived. They found out. Come to the house. My parents want to speak with you. David, worried but hopeful, arrived at the Borden home, only to be met with rage. Michael confronted him, forbidding him from ever seeing his daughter again. The conversation was intense, charged with anger, morality, and the clash of two worlds. To Michael and Catherine, love was something sacred and to be experienced only in adulthood within the sanctity of marriage. But to Kara and David, it was the kind of love that felt worth defying everything for. But what happened next would shake the quiet town of Lidditz. To its core, the confrontation didn't soften Michael Borden's heart. Instead, it ignited a warning. He told the young man plainly, if he ever saw David near Kara again, he would contact the police, report him for being involved with a minor. The emotional exchange ended bitterly. Kara was once again confined to her room. David left humiliated, defeated, and heartbroken. He climbed into his old car, and for the first time in his life, cried over a girl, or perhaps over the pain of being dismissed so completely. The forced separation became unbearable for the two teens. Long days turned into emotional torment, and they found themselves unable to let go. So, they devised a plan. They would pretend to break up, just as Kara's parents had demanded, but secretly, they would continue their relationship in church. At community gatherings, they played the part of former lovers. They didn't speak. They barely looked at each other. It was all an act, and the Bordens believed it. They thought their daughter had finally come to her senses. But David missed her terribly. At night, he read Shakespeare under dim light, imagining himself a modern-day Romeo. Yet, unlike the Capulet and Montague tragedy, where love remained unfulfilled, David Ludwig decided he would not be denied. So, he made a bold move. He called the Borden home and asked to meet with Michael directly. He said he wanted to speak openly about his love for Kara and their plans to marry. It was November 13th, 2005. That day, David Ludwig arrived at the Borden home. He confessed everything. Their relationship had never ended, and they wanted to get married. Unsurprisingly, Michael's response was swift and final. That will never happen. But David had come prepared, fueled by anger, humiliation, and obsession. He pulled out a handgun. As Michael turned his back, walking toward the front door, David shot him. Then, he turned the gun on Catherine Borden, shooting her while she sat helplessly in a chair. After murdering both parents, David searched the house, calling out for Kara but couldn't find her. Panicked, he ran outside and jumped in his car. Moments later, he spotted Kara running down the street toward him. She climbed into the passenger seat and told him she wanted to get away, far away, get married, start over. And so they fled. The question that shocked everyone was, why would a 14-year-old girl run off with a man who had just killed her parents? Was she terrified, traumatized, or willing? Both were considered good kids. So how did they become fugitives? Back in Lidditz, a nightmare was unfolding. Michael and Catherine Borden were found dead in their home. Kara was missing. Surveillance footage soon revealed a troubling truth. Kara had not been abducted. She had gone with David willingly. As a result, the charge of abduction was dropped. But what remained was far more serious. An alert went out across the region. The couple was believed to be driving west in David's red Volkswagen Jetta. Early Monday morning, a tip came in. A vehicle matching their description had been seen parked at a truck stop outside Fort Wayne, Indiana. When police arrived, the car was gone. Soon after, Indiana State Police spotted the Jetta traveling along Interstate 70. What followed was a high-speed chase, with David pushing the car to 92-95 miles per hour. According to Trooper David Cox, Ludwig was driving recklessly, swerving and nearly causing multiple accidents. like something straight out of an action movie. By now, the story had exploded across national media. The teenage lovers were no longer just a local tragedy. They were headline news. After a dangerous pursuit, the chase ended with David crashing into a tree. Both he and Kara were taken into custody just 28 hours after the murders. David Ludwig was arrested on November 14, 2005. He faced multiple charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder. Kara Beth Borden, however, was not charged with any crime. She was placed in the care of relatives and members of her church. On November 16th, Ludwig waived extradition and was returned to Pennsylvania. The so-called Romeo confessed without hesitation. It was a deliberate act. I intended to shoot them if they got in our way, and I did. A search of his home revealed a dark side, though no weapons were found in the vehicle at the time of arrest. Police discovered 54 firearms at his house and arsenal that belonged to his father, an avid hunter who had taught David how to shoot. Even more disturbing was an 18-minute video recovered from his laptop. In it, Ludwig discussed plans to storm another family's home, carrying weapons inside. That plan had apparently been abandoned only because too many cars were in the driveway. The prosecution made its position clear. David Ludwig was no lovesick teen. He was a calculating killer. Despite this, the court recognized Kara Borden as a victim, not an accomplice. Surveillance footage confirmed that she had multiple chances to escape but never tried. She had willingly joined David. Still, prosecutors believed she was emotionally manipulated and traumatized. On November 22, 2005, all charges against her were officially dropped at a memorial held at Lancaster Bible College. Kara and her siblings mourned the loss of their parents. The girl who had once dreamed of escape now lived in silence under legal guardianship. In June 2006, David Ludwig accepted a plea deal. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder and additional charges. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms, plus 9.5 to 19 years, and ordered to pay $125,000 in restitution. David Ludwig will never walk free again. As for Kara Beth, she vanished from public life. The girl who once believed she was living out a tragic love story had instead lost everything: her parents, her innocence, and her future. The aftermath of the tragedy left the small town of Lidditz in quiet mourning in remembrance of Michael and Catherine Borden. Neighbors tied white ribbons around mailboxes, a silent symbol of grief and respect. The murders left 5 children without their parents, their home now hollow and stripped of the love and guidance that once defined it. George Landis, an elder at the family's chapel, offered a solemn reflection. Only God knows the purpose behind such loss. He reassured the grieving community that Mike and Katie are in a better place. Vera Zimmerman, a longtime acquaintance of both the Borden family and David Ludwig's mother, spoke of the children's strict but loving upbringing. She noted how a single lapse in judgment, just one, had led to unimaginable consequences. Friends remembered Kara Beth Borden as a vibrant, kind-hearted girl who loved soccer and babysitting neighborhood kids. Kevin Eckelman, executive pastor at Ephrata Community Church, recalled her active involvement in youth group. But even amid the fond memories, there were whispers of tension. Zimmerman acknowledged that Kara's growing interest in boys had been a concern for her parents. As more details emerged, the investigation painted a chilling portrait. Ludwig's friend, Samuel P. Lohr, told authorities that the couple had shared an intense secret relationship complete with flirtatious texts and the exchange of inappropriate images. At one point, the Borden parents responded to the escalating situation by cutting off Kara's internet access. It was their way of drawing a hard boundary, a desperate attempt to control something already unraveling. The peaceful community was stunned. How could 2 teenagers, raised in sheltered religious households, commit such devastating acts? Friends and neighbors especially those in the homeschooling network, struggled to comprehend it. They weren't officially a couple, said 16-year-old Stephanie Mammon, a neighbor. Her parents didn't approve. So, officially, they weren't anything. But David Ludwig didn't see it that way. Faced with rejection, he chose violence over acceptance. His solution to opposition was irreversible. After the trial, Ludwig appealed his sentence, hoping for relief under a 2012 U.S. Supreme Court ruling that found life sentences for juveniles to be unconstitutional. But his appeal was denied. He had been 18 and a half at the time of the murders, legally an adult. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court agreed with Judge David Ashworth, who called the appeal untimely and unfounded. The Lancaster County Prosecutor's Office held firm. Ludwig had made adult decisions and would face adult consequences. Following his sentencing on June 20th, Ludwig underwent evaluation at Camp Hill before being transferred to the State Correctional Institution at Pine Grove on August 3rd, a facility for youthful offenders, ages 15 to 20, at Pine Grove. Ludwig joined a therapeutic community designed to instill structure and accountability. Inmates began their days at 6:10 a.m. with military-style roll calls and workouts, followed by education and vocational training. Programs included culinary arts, carpentry, and life management skills. Jobs earned inmates 18 to 42 cents an hour, which could be used for necessities from the commissary. Despite the structure, it was clear Ludwig's life would never again belong to him. He would grow older behind bars, surrounded by concrete and consequences. His attorney, Merrill Spann, noted that the transition from county jail where Ludwig had earned his high school diploma to the sprawling state prison was especially difficult. It was a small place, Spann said. He had gotten used to it. The cost of housing Ludwig at Pine Grove, about $120 a day. Most inmates there are transferred to adult facilities by age 22. Ludwig, now 37, remains incarcerated in Luzerne County, still serving 2 consecutive life sentences for the murders of Michael and Catherine. Borden committed because they told him he could no longer see their daughter. Meanwhile, Cara Beth Borden returned to Pennsylvania after the ordeal. She was reunited with her family but remained under the legal guardianship of relatives. According to CBS News, authorities did not charge her with any crime. Instead, they officially recognized her as a victim. Still, there were lingering questions. Could a 14-year-old girl be completely unaware, uninvolved in what unfolded that night? Could she have played a more active role than what was publicly acknowledged? Warwick Police Chief Richard G. Gleason Jr. offered this. Cara is upset. She's crying. She's 14 years old. And we seem to forget that sometimes. She's devastated. The community mourned not just the lives lost, but the unraveling of something they thought was safe, an illusion of control, of innocence, shattered. They were wonderful people, said one neighbor at the memorial service. We'll miss them terribly. Lancaster County Coroner G. Gary Kirshner summed up the collective feeling best. This isn't a Romeo and Juliet story. It's something much worse. In the end, 3 lives were lost that day, 2 to bullets, and 1 to the consequences of rage and desperation. David Ludwig may still breathe, but his freedom, his choices, and his future were buried the moment he pulled the trigger. He will never again walk the streets freely, never again love without restriction, never again make a decision without a guard watching. And yet, the tragedy serves as a haunting reminder. Strict homes and religious walls cannot always keep the outside world and its temptations away. Perhaps, in shielding their daughter from everything, Michael and Catherine missed something essential: connection, trust, and honest conversation. Maybe, just maybe, this didn't have to happen. Sometimes, in their attempts to protect their children from the chaos of the world, parents try to recreate the life they once knew, the freedom, the simplicity, the innocence. But in doing so, they often impose rules, restrictions, and deprivations that deny their children autonomy. And when choices are made for them without dialogue or understanding, those children may rebel in devastating ways. We can only speculate what might have prevented certain tragedies, but one truth stands tall above the rest. Violence breeds more violence. When we're raised in environments where pain is normalized, where discipline becomes punishment, and punishment becomes cruelty, we begin to accept violence as part of life. We practice it, we absorb it, and eventually, we use it as a solution. Tragically, many of these patterns emerge not from broken streets, but from homes cloaked in faith where Christian values are preached, but rarely practiced. And yet, true Christianity condemns violence in all forms. Michael Madison case. Dark transition. Michael Madison was born 2 weeks before Halloween in 1977 in Cleveland, Ohio. His entrance into the world was marked not by joy, but by rejection. His parents, Diane Madison and John Baldwin, had no meaningful relationship. John denied even being Michael's father and walked out, leaving Diane, young and unprepared, to raise her son alone. Diane's own childhood had been brutal, raised by a mother addicted to heroin and involved in sex work. She was emotionally unequipped for motherhood. Shortly after Michael's birth, social workers became regular visitors to the home. The reports were disturbing. Diane allowed a rotating cast of violent boyfriends into Michael's life. When he was just 2 years old, she force-fed him until he began vomiting. Frustrated, she placed the screaming toddler in scalding water, then beat him with an extension cord. The pattern continued. At age 3, Michael was beaten with a belt so savagely he was hospitalized. Another time, the blows were so severe that he lost hearing in one ear. Eventually, he was sent to live with his grandmother, who was still using heroin and working in sex work. There was no escape from chaos. Michael's body bore the signs of lifelong trauma. By the time he reached adolescence, he was already deeply familiar to local law enforcement. He was arrested for multiple offenses: minor theft, delinquency, and inappropriately touching a classmate in high school. But those early crimes were a shadow of what was to come. July 2013 murders discovered. In July 2013, 38-year-old Angela Deskins was reported missing. Her family didn't panic. Angela had disappeared before, but a month later, her decomposing body was found, wrapped in electrical cords with a belt around her neck. Next came 28, Shatisha Lee. Last seen in September 2012, she never showed up to her mother's house to borrow money. Her body was later discovered in a plastic garbage bag. Then, 18-year-old Sherelda Terry Bright, kind and full of potential, vanished after returning home from her job at an elementary school. Her body, too, was found sealed in a black trash bag. All 3 victims were discovered near Michael Madison's apartment building. His neighbors had called authorities after a horrific odor began emanating from his garage. Inside, police found a decomposing corpse. A search of surrounding vacant properties revealed 2 more bodies, all wrapped in plastic, all murdered with chilling precision. A warrant was issued. Inside Madison's home, police found signs of decomposition and further incriminating evidence. The manhunt was on. Madison was finally located at his mother's house. He refused to surrender, initiating a tense standoff. Eventually, he was taken into custody, but he never showed a moment of remorse. During the trial, Madison mocked the victims' families. He smirked during testimony. He laughed during grief. And during the emotional victim impact statement by Sherelda Terry's father, he smiled a cold, hateful smile. The father lunged at him in raw fury, but was restrained before he could reach Madison. Sentencing and aftermath. The jury didn't take long. Michael Madison was found guilty on all counts. 3 murders, 3 kidnappings, abuse of a corpse, rape, and weapons possession by a felon. On May 20th, 2016, he was sentenced to death. He appealed, but in July 2020, the Ohio Supreme Court upheld the sentence unanimously. There would be no second chance. Ronald O'Brien, Halloween Horror, Halloween. is supposed to be a night of fun, a harmless tradition, where children dress up and collect candy door to door. Parents usually watch over them, alert to danger. But in 1974, one father weaponized that trust. Ronald O'Brien, of Pasadena, Texas, stood by his son's side as the boy convulsed violently on the bathroom floor. 8-year-old Timothy O'Brien had just eaten candy from his trick-or-treat bag. Within hours, he was dead. An autopsy revealed something horrifying. Timothy had ingested enough potassium cyanide to kill 2 grown men at first. Police believed a random killer was targeting children, someone poisoning Halloween candy for no reason other than rage at the world. Panic spread. Parents rushed to turn in their children's candy for inspection. But the truth was even worse. As it turned out, Timothy's father, Ronald O'Brien, had taken out a life insurance policy on his son and poisoned the pixie sticks himself. He had handed out similar poisoned candy to other children that night, hoping to cover his tracks. By pure luck, the other children hadn't eaten them. O'Brien had tried to murder multiple kids, all to collect a few $1,000s in insurance. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to death on March 31st, 1984. Ronald O'Brien was executed by lethal injection. He became known as the man who killed Halloween. Closing reflection. Quiet fade out from Michael Madison's haunted childhood to Ronald O'Brien's calculated betrayal. These stories show the darkest capabilities of the human soul. Violence born of pain, of greed, of learned cruelty. They remind us that monsters aren't always strangers. Sometimes, they live right among us. Ronald O'Brien, the Candyman, killer. The poison that killed Timothy O'Brien had been hidden inside a seemingly harmless treat, a pixie sticks. But the sweet and sour powder it once contained had been replaced with something far deadlier, cyanide. As detectives canvassed the neighborhood, speaking to residents at each house the O'Brien children had visited on Halloween night, one thing became clear: none of them had handed out pixie sticks. But someone had seen who did. That person was Ronald O'Brien, Timothy's own father. When brought in for questioning, O'Brien claimed a mysterious man had emerged from a darkened house and handed him several pixie sticks to distribute to the children. He alleged he'd never seen the man before and couldn't identify him. According to O'Brien, after Timothy complained the powder tasted funny, he simply gave his son a soft drink to help wash it down, a fatal decision. Trying to portray himself as cooperative, Ronald even provided police with the address of the home where the exchange supposedly occurred. But when police tracked down the resident, an air traffic controller named Courtney Melvin, they quickly unraveled O'Brien's story. Melvin had been at work until after midnight and had a alibi backed by time cards, his supervisor, and over 200 co-workers. It was all a lie, and Ronald O'Brien knew it. As investigators dug into his background, they discovered a troubling history. O'Brien, trained as an optician, was deeply in debt, chronically unemployed, and had been accused of theft by multiple past employers. But it was a financial paper trail that would prove most damning. In the months before Halloween, Ronald O'Brien had taken out not 1, but 3 life insurance policies on his children. Just hours after Timothy's death, he called the insurance company to ask how soon he could collect the payout. As his son lay lifeless in the morgue, Ronald was already calculating the profit. On November 5th, 1974, less than a week after Timothy died, Ronald Clark O'Brien was arrested and charged with 1 count of murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. Unsurprisingly, he pleaded not guilty. During the trial, witness after witness testified about O'Brien's recent obsession with cyanide. He had asked friends and acquaintances where he could buy it, and even inquired how much was needed to kill a person. The case against him was overwhelming. In June 1975, 8 months after the murder, Ronald O'Brien was convicted of killing his son. He was also found guilty of attempting to poison 4 other children, all of whom had fortunately not consumed the doctored candy. Originally sentenced to die in the electric chair, O'Brien's punishment was later changed to death by lethal injection. It took the jury just over an hour to reach a verdict, but it would take nearly a decade before O'Brien's execution would be carried out. On death row, O'Brien was despised, even by fellow inmates. Many considered him the lowest of the low. When his execution day finally arrived on March 31st, 1984, prisoners reportedly threw a party to celebrate, as Ronald O'Brien was pronounced dead at age 39. A crowd outside the prison erupted, shouting, "Trick or treat," and tossing candy into the air in memory of little Timothy, the boy who had paid the ultimate price for his father's greed. Todd Allen read The Forest. Park Killer West Burnside Street in Portland, Oregon, was a place known to many, especially vulnerable women trying to survive. It was also the common thread in a chilling string of murders that shocked the city. It was speculated that two of the victims, Lila and Stephanie, may have known each other, but this was never definitively proven. What investigators did uncover was more disturbing. All three women, including Alexandria, had been murdered elsewhere. Their bodies were later dumped in Forest Park. Toxicology reports revealed that all three had used heroin before their deaths. Law enforcement wasted no time. A specialist task force was formed, 16 officers strong, determined to catch whoever was targeting the city's most vulnerable. They didn't just investigate, they protected. The department provided 30 additional shelter beds for unhoused women and sent officers to bars and community hubs, offering both outreach and reassurance. But the public, growing uneasy, became frustrated with the lack of information. The police remained tight-lipped, their silence a sign of the urgency and intensity of the hunt. Using the victims' physical similarities to their advantage, police devised an undercover operation. A female officer who resembled the victims posed as a sex worker on West Burnside, hoping to draw the killer out. And on July 7th, as a vigil was being held for Lila, Stephanie, and Alexandria, the trap worked. A man approached the undercover officer around 5:20 a.m. and immediately drew suspicion. Sergeant John Bocciolotti stopped him. The man, 36-year-old Todd Allen Reed, admitted he was a registered sex offender and consented to a search of his car. Inside, officers found an unused condom, yellow strapping, and a book titled The Killing Gift, about a woman who could murder men with just a glance. It wasn't enough to arrest him, so he was let go, but he was far from free. Detective Sergeant Dave Schlagel recognized Reed from a 1992 sexual assault case. In fact, Schlagel had been the arresting officer. With this connection established, police placed Reed under 24-hour surveillance, both at his home and his job. Soon, they observed him circling the same streets where the victims had last been seen, West Burnside and Sandy Boulevard. Then came the breakthrough. DNA recovered from the condom found at one of the crime scenes, and DNA from Stephanie's thighs matched a sample already on file for Todd Allen Reed. On July 18th, at 7:30 p.m., while Reed was at work unloading produce at Renala Produce, police raided the home he shared with his girlfriend. She phoned him immediately. Reed tried to flee mid-shift, but it was too late. By 11:30 p.m., police were waiting for him. He was arrested in the warehouse parking lot just 11 days after they first questioned him, and a month and a half after the task force was assembled. On July 27th, Reed was indicted on 7 criminal counts related to the murders. It was revealed he had been under post-prison supervision and was kicked out of his sex offender treatment program just 2 weeks before his arrest for repeatedly failing to attend. On February 23, 2001, Todd Allen Reed pleaded guilty to all charges. In exchange for taking the death penalty off the table, he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. But that may not be the end of his crimes. Reed remains the prime suspect in at least 2 other murders, possibly 3, all in the Portland area. Among them, the 1987 unsolved killings of 15-year-old Jennifer Lyncher and 12-year-old Mendy Colleen Thomas, as well as the 1999 disappearance of 19-year-old Amama Sines. Jennifer disappeared on July 3, 1987. Her skeletal remains were discovered. Exactly 1 year and 5 days later, Mendy vanished from her apartment complex on August 3, 1987. Her body was found on October 4, 1988. Both girls had been strangled and their bodies dumped in wooded areas of Gresham, just 3 miles apart. Chillingly, both were last seen in the company of Gail Bennett, Reed's girlfriend at the time, and later his wife. They married in 1988 and divorced in 1997. Police long suspected that Bennett may have knowledge of the crimes. She has a criminal record of her own, but has remained uncooperative. Though Reed was questioned back in 1987 due to his connection to Gail, he was never charged. After his 2001 arrest for the Forest Park murders, investigators renewed their focus on those older cases. But efforts to link his DNA to the Gresham murders were ultimately inconclusive. Then there's the disappearance of Amama Sines, last seen on June 30, 1999. She was known to work as a sex worker and may have been friends with Alexandria Isnan, one of Reed's confirmed victims. While no charges have been filed in her case, police have not ruled Reed out. As of June 2020, the prison where Todd Allen Reed was being held was unknown. By mid-2021, his name no longer appeared on the official inmate roster. It's possible he may be dead. Princess Doe, the Jane Doe that haunted Blairstown for 40 years. In the summer of 1982, a teenage girl's beaten body was discovered in a remote cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey. No one knew her name. No one came forward. The authorities simply called her Princess Doe, a symbol of both hope and tragedy. For decades, her identity remained a mystery. Early investigation and false leads not long after her discovery. One of the first potential identifications came in a missing girl named Diane Dye from California, but a comparison of DNA samples between the unidentified girl and Diane's mother, Patricia Dye, ruled out the match conclusively. A few days before her body was found, a woman named Amy Latimer told authorities she had seen a girl wearing the same clothing as Princess Doe, shopping for cigarettes at a supermarket directly across from the Cedar Ridge Cemetery. Latimer had been there with her daughter on July 13, 1982, just 2 days before the body was discovered. Investigators traced the victim's blouse and skirt to a manufacturer in the Midwest, although the brand labels had been removed. Interestingly, 3 witnesses claimed they had purchased similar outfits from a now-defunct store on Long Island, New York. Still, no one could say who the girl was. Exhumation and forensic attempts, and a push for answers. Princess Doe's body was exhumed on September 22, 1999. New samples were collected for DNA analysis before she was respectfully reburied in the same cemetery. Then, in 2012, a digitally enhanced facial reconstruction was released to the public. It triggered a wave of new leads and tips, especially from those who thought she resembled missing girls from across the country. One theory even suggested she had worked under false names at a hotel in Ocean City, Maryland. To pinpoint her origins, investigators turned to isotope analysis of a hair strand and tooth. The results suggested the victim was born in the U.S. and had spent 7 to 10 months in the Midwest or Northeast. Her dental isotopes hinted at possible time spent in Arizona, but one location stood out the most: Long Island, New York, where it's believed she may have lived for an extended period. Media and law enforcement push retired Lieutenant Eric Krantz, the original lead investigator, was instrumental in giving Princess Doe her nickname and pushing the case into the national spotlight. His efforts led to the case being the first unidentified person entered into the FBI's national database. The case received widespread media attention. In 1983, HBO filmed a documentary segment following Lt. Krantz as he tracked new leads and participated participated in the victim's funeral. Years later, America's Most Wanted profiled the case, and CNN broadcasted the most recent composite reconstruction on July 15, 2012. That same day, on the 30th anniversary of her discovery, a memorial was held near the ravine where she was found. Over 100 people attended. Her photos and clothing were displayed, honoring a life that had long gone unnamed. Princess Doe was also honored in 2014 at a local missing persons rally. Theories over the years. In the years between 1982 and 2022, numerous theories circulated. Diane Dye theory ruled out via DNA. John Reese theory, a convicted killer in nearby Bydor, Nay, investigated but no link found. Ocean City prostitute theory suggested she was a runaway or sex worker, but no solid leads confirmed it. Police cover-up theory. Some speculated she was killed by a Blairstown officer. This theory is completely unsubstantiated. Serial killer victim theory. Some suggested she was targeted by serial killers like Henry Lee Lucas, John Cly, or Joel Rifkin, but no credible evidence supported these claims. Summer camp worker theory. Proposed she may have worked at a local camp. Again, unconfirmed. But one theory stood out above the rest. The Kinlaw confession in 1999. Evidence emerged that convicted criminal Arthur Kinlaw and his wife Donna Kinlaw might be connected to Princess Doe's murder. Donna had been arrested in California for welfare fraud while using the alias Ilana. Police traced the name to a woman from Long Island, and Donna began to talk. She implicated Arthur in multiple murders, including that of a sex worker named Linda. Donna testified that Arthur had killed at least 2 other women whose identities remain unknown. One of them, she claimed, matched the description of Princess Doe, but at the time, without knowing the girl's name, investigators couldn't confirm the link. The breakthrough genetic genealogy, November 2020. Princess Doe's body was exhumed a second time thanks to a grant. Samples were submitted to Estria Forensics, known for their success with degraded DNA. In May 2021, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, notified investigators that DNA markers were successfully extracted. By February 2022, a complete DNA profile had been created and submitted to Innovative Forensics Investigations, led by genealogist Jennifer Moore, who agreed to do the work pro bono. On February 22, 2022, investigators were informed a candidate had been identified. Authorities traveled to West Babylon, New York, and met with Robert Alanak Jr., who confirmed the possibility. A DNA sample from his sister further supported the match. Mitochondrial DNA and STR testing confirmed it. On April 29, 2022, after 40 years of uncertainty, the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification officially identified Princess Doe as Dawn Olenek, born in 1964, from Long Island, New York. Her name was formally announced to the public on July 15, 2022, exactly 40 years to the day after her body was discovered. Robert later revealed that Dawn had left home at her mother's request. After that, she was never seen again. Justice, still elusive. Back in 1999, Arthur Kinlaw's name had already surfaced, but without a known identity for the victim, charges were impossible. Now, with Dawn identified, investigators returned to Donna Kinlaw's testimony. She had revealed disturbing details about multiple murders, how Arthur had targeted vulnerable women, often sex workers, and left no trace. Arthur Kinlaw remains the prime suspect in the murder of Dawn Olenek, but despite Donna's confessions, law enforcement has yet to gather enough admissible evidence to charge him in her death. Today, Dawn's grave no longer reads Princess Doe. Her name is finally etched into stone, her identity restored, but justice still waiting. Princess Doe, the girl in the cemetery in 1982. Donna Kinlaw told police that she had been with her husband, Arthur Kinlaw, in a cemetery when she witnessed him commit a brutal murder. Another report indicated that around July of that year, Arthur brought home a teenage girl. He left with her and returned alone. Shaken and acting erratically, he later disposed of his clothing and cleaned his vehicle. When Donna refused to go to work that day, he threatened her life. "I'll do to you what I did to that girl," he warned. Yet despite this confession and her chilling statement, a lack of cooperation meant Arthur Kinlaw was never charged. For decades, the case went cold. Lieutenant Stephen Spears, once part of the Warren County Prosecutor's Office, recalled Kinlaw confessing to the girl's death, but with no physical evidence and without even knowing the girl's name. There was nothing to legally tie him to the crime. "I have no way of connecting the dots," Spears said. "I can't place her and him in the same place at the same time." Even more troubling, despite both Kinlaws claiming to have spent time with the girl, neither could give her name. Still, Donna Kinlaw cooperated with a forensic artist who created a sketch based on the girl she said had been in their home. That sketch bore a striking resemblance to the most recent composite of the unidentified victim known only as Princess Doe. Arthur Kinlaw was already incarcerated for 2 counts of second-degree murder by 2022. When Princess Doe's case was reopened, investigators reconsidered him a serious suspect, and this time, they had more tools at their disposal. The girl he had allegedly murdered would finally be identified as Dawn Olenek, a junior at Connecticut High School in Bohemia, Long Island, born August 5, 1964. She had lived with her mother and sister until she left home, possibly after being thrown out, according to her brother. She vanished soon after. For more than 2 decades, Arthur Kinlaw had been whispered about as the likely killer. In 1999, his wife Donna tied him not just to the Long Island murders, for which he was already convicted, but also to the girl found beaten to death and dumped in Cedar Ridge Cemetery in Blairstown, New Jersey. Donna told Newsday that in the summer of 1982, Arthur had brought home a girl around 18 years old. Later that night, he left with her and returned alone, visibly shaken. A couple weeks later, she came across a story about a girl's body discovered in a cemetery in New Jersey. When she read the article aloud, her husband kept asking, "Does it say who she was? Does it say who got killed?" The article had referred to the girl as Princess Jane Doe. Afterward, police exhumed the body, hoping to extract DNA from a femur. Years passed. The trail ran cold. Although Kinlaw had confessed to the New Jersey murder in written statements dating as far back as 2005, the identity of the girl and thus any formal charge remained elusive. That changed in April 2022, when the victim was positively identified as Dawn Olenek. She had been missing for 40 years. Now 68 years old, Arthur Kinlaw remains imprisoned in Sullivan County, New York. In April 1984, he had confessed to killing another young woman he only knew as Linda in the Bronx. "I strangled her with my hands," he said. "She was hit about the head by me with a bat." Following the 2022 developments, Kinlaw was officially charged with Dawn's murder. Investigators believe that after she refused his demands to enter prostitution, he drove her to New Jersey, far from the familiar streets of Long Island. In Blairstown, he murdered her and left her body in a cemetery. Neither he nor Dawn had any connection to the town. Today, Kinlaw remains incarcerated at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg. The DNA that changed everything, what, finally, unraveled the mystery of Princess Doe wasn't a confession or a witness, it was a single tooth. A molar root weighing just 200 milligrams would hold the secrets that had eluded law enforcement for 4 decades. In 2021, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, submitted Dawn's molar and a single eyelash to Astria Forensics, a lab known for working with degraded or nearly unusable DNA. "We knew if anyone could do it, Astria could," said Carol Schweitzer, a forensic supervisor at NCMEC, and they did. Kelly Concrite, CEO of Astria, said they were lucky. The DNA was exceptionally well preserved and allowed for the extraction of hundreds of millions of unique genetic fragments. Using cutting-edge sequencing technology, Astria reconstructed Dawn's entire genome, a scientific feat that would have been impossible even a decade ago. Once complete, the files were sent to Innovative Forensic Investigations, IFI, where genealogists began the painstaking task of building a family tree using investigative genetic genealogy. Through the combined efforts of IFI, Astria, NCMEC, and the Warren County Prosecutor's Office, the girl once known only as Princess Doe finally had her name back. Dawn Olenek, a community that never let go a press conference. Warren County Prosecutor James Pfeiffer emphasized that science had made the impossible possible, but beyond the data and the DNA. This case was deeply personal for both law enforcement and the community of Blairstown for 40 years. Blairstown treated her like one of their own, said Dawn's cousin, holding a photo of her pinned to his chest. He added, "She's always in my heart." From the moment her body was found, Princess Doe held a special place in the town's collective memory. Blairstown buried her with dignity, returned to her gravesite year after year, and vowed to never stop searching for her name. A legacy of justice. Princess Doe was more than a local mystery. She became a national symbol. Her case was the first unidentified persons case ever entered into the FBI's National Crime Information Center (NCIC) on June 30, 1983, under the directive of then FBI Director William Webster. Her story sparked the beginnings of national efforts to catalog and solve unidentified victim cases across the country. Now, with her identity restored and her killer charged, the decades-long pursuit for truth has come full circle. For Dawn, Alanek's family, and for the community that refused to forget her, this is more than closure. It's justice. It's proof that no one is truly lost as long as someone keeps looking. Princess Doe and the cold case that wouldn't die for decades. The case of Princess Doe haunted both investigators and the community. Entered into the National Crime Information Center (NCIC) as a missing and unidentified person. Her profile remained active, a symbol of law enforcement's refusal to give up. Investigators never stopped searching, pouring in time, resources, and eventually, cutting-edge technology. And finally, 40 years after her body was discovered, Princess Doe was identified as Dawn Olenek, thanks to the combined efforts of police and genealogical DNA testing experts. So, what do you think about this cold case finally being solved after 4 decades? Were your theories about Princess Doe close to the truth? Let us know in the comments. The murder of Jane Anchor Hilton, a wrongful conviction unraveled in the early hours of July 7, 1985. 54-year-old Jane Anchor Hilton was found brutally murdered, beaten, stabbed 29 times, and bearing a bite mark on her shoulder. She had only moved into her new residence the day before, seeking refuge from a troubled marriage. Her body was discovered in a bedroom at her employer's home in El Dorado Hills, California, by 2 housemates and her 13-year-old daughter, Autumn. The crime made no sense. There was no clear motive. The case went cold for 14 years. But in 1999, 2 detectives reopened the investigation. Their renewed interest, sparked by a single line in an old news article, would send the case spiraling in a controversial direction. That misquoted line led detectives to focus on Ricky Davis, Jane's housemate at the time of her murder. Though Davis had always maintained his innocence, he soon found himself at the center of a renewed investigation and a growing storm of false confessions and flawed interrogation tactics. The night Jane Hilton died. Jane Hilton was a well-known figure in El Dorado Hills, a columnist for Foothill Times, a mother of 6, and a woman who loved writing poetry to inspire her children. Jane was working toward her real estate license while navigating a rocky marriage to her husband, Archie Hilton. In early July 1985, she moved in with her employer, Wilma McClyde. whose large home was already filled with Wilma's daughter, grandson Ricky Davis, and his girlfriend, Connie Dahl. On July 6th, Jane and her daughter Autumn settled into the home. Just hours later, Jane would be dead at 3:30 a.m. Ricky and Connie returned from a party to find Autumn outside, saying she'd stayed out late and was afraid of getting into trouble. The three entered the house together. The hallway carpet was soaked in blood. Following the trail led them to Maureen McCline's bedroom, where they found Jane's bloodied body lying on the bed. Paramedics were called, but Jane was already gone. She had been stabbed nearly 30 times. Her murder was savage and confusing. Archie Hilton was quickly questioned and cleared, his alibi solid and his DNA not a match. The case hit a dead end and remained there until 1999. A misquote, a mistrial, and a manufactured confession in the reopened investigation. Detectives Richard Strasser and Rick Fitzgerald stumbled across an old interview with Connie Dahl. In it, she said, Jane had been found lying in bed, as if someone had placed her there in her usual sleeping position. Detectives believed this conflicted with Ricky Davis's previous account, in which they misheard him saying Jane was found on the floor. With this perceived contradiction, detectives zeroed in on Dahl. At the time, she was serving time in Oregon on unrelated charges. They brought her in for questioning. Over the course of 4 separate interrogations spanning 18 months, Dahl was subjected to tactics known to produce false confessions. She was shown gruesome crime scene photos, fed specific details about the murder, and told that DNA evidence would soon implicate her, even though no DNA testing had actually been done. Under pressure, Dahl's story changed repeatedly. In one version, she claimed Autumn was in the room during the murder. In another, she admitted to possibly being the one who bit Jane. Eventually, she claimed an argument had broken out between Davis and Jane when Davis insisted Autumn come to a party. When Jane refused, she said Davis snapped. Detectives used this coerced confession to arrest Davis for murder, despite major inconsistencies and the lack of physical evidence. Dahl accepted a plea deal, manslaughter, in exchange for testifying against Davis. She served just 1 year in jail. The trial of Ricky Davis at Davis's first trial, the jury couldn't agree. A mistrial was declared, but in 2005, he was retried. Dahl took the stand again, recounting a story shaped by police pressure, one where she struggled with Jane, bit her on the shoulder, then left the room as Davis carried out the fatal assault. There was no physical evidence connecting Davis to the crime, but Dahl's testimony, though deeply flawed, was enough. Davis was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Dahl died of a drug overdose in 2014. Ricky Davis was still behind bars. The Innocence Project steps in Davis never stopped fighting. In 2006, he reached out to the Northern California Innocence Project (NCIP), a nonprofit founded by attorneys Kathleen Rodolphe and Linda Starr, to assist wrongfully convicted inmates through DNA testing. Together with the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office, NCIP began re-examining the evidence. Crime scene materials including Jane Hilton's nightgown and the biological evidence beneath her fingernails were retested using modern DNA methods. The results were groundbreaking. DNA from both samples came from the same unknown male, and crucially, they did not match Ricky Davis, Connie Dahl, or even Jane's estranged husband, Archie Hilton, who had since passed away. The forensic evidence proved Dahl's testimony false and revealed that the real killer was still unidentified. The DNA was uploaded to CODIS, but no match came back. Still, Davis's innocence was now undeniable. Despite the DNA breakthrough, the road to justice for Ricky Davis was far from over. At the time, California law still required that new evidence point unerringly to innocence, a nearly impossible legal standard. But Davis's legal team, supported by the Northern California Innocence Project (NCIP), argued that if the jury had seen the DNA evidence during Davis's original trial, the outcome would likely have been very different. In 2015, False Confession, expert Dr. Richard Leo reviewed transcripts of Davis's co-defendant, Michael Dahl. Dr. Leo concluded that the detectives had used psychologically coercive tactics during Dahl's interrogation tactics designed to elicit a story that matched the detective's theory of the case, rather than the truth. Then in 2016, momentum began to build. The NCIP co-sponsored Senate Bill 1134, which proposed a more attainable standard, that new evidence only needed to be likely compelling to a jury. California State Senator Mark Leno championed the bill, and it passed into law in January 2017. Aligning California with 43 other states, attorney Melissa O'Connell filed a petition for a new trial based on the newly tested DNA. In 2019, El Dorado County Superior Court Judge Kenneth Malikian vacated Davis's 2005 murder conviction and ordered a new trial. It was originally scheduled for the fall of that year, but later postponed to April 2020 due to Davis's attorney's health issues. But fate had another twist in store. Narration intensifies. Advancements in DNA science would do more than just clear Davis's name. They would identify the real killer, using genetic genealogy, a revolutionary approach that cross-references crime scene DNA with public family tree databases. Investigators made a shocking discovery. In February 2020, they announced that DNA recovered from the crime scene matched Michael Green, a man who had never even been a suspect. Green, now a longtime Roseville resident and 1986 graduate of Oakmont High School, had been just 17 years old when Jane Hilton was murdered. Those who knew him described him as laid-back, kind, and even-tempered, super chill, said one former classmate. On the night of July 6, 1985, Jane's daughter Autumn had spent the evening with Green and two other friends, Calvin and Stephen. After briefly returning home to shower, Autumn allegedly told her mother she was going to a friend's house, but instead, she rejoined the boys at the park. Investigators believe it was during that time that Green broke into the Hilton home. They speculate Jane surprised him, and a violent struggle followed. Green stabbed her 29 times. When Autumn and Davis returned home, they discovered Jane's mutilated body, never suspecting that her killer was someone they'd just spent time with. Green had no prior criminal convictions and had lived a quiet, ordinary life until science caught up with him. Calvin had since passed away, but Stephen was tracked down and interviewed. He was treated as a witness, not a suspect. Michael Green was arrested on February 11, 2020, because he was a minor at the time of the murder. His case began in juvenile court, but soon after, he was transferred to adult court, after a lengthy wait. On July 29, 2022, Green entered a plea of no contest, relinquishing his right to a jury trial, and to appeal. His sentencing was set for September 27, 2022, overseen by Judge Suzanne Kingsbury. Courtroom segment begins. Dr. Elizabeth Kaufman, a professor of psychological science, testified on the development of adolescent brains, emphasizing that teenagers, while capable of understanding right from wrong, also lack full impulse control and emotional regulation. Childhood friends and family described Green as popular, funny, and loving before and after the murder. Even his ex-wife, Karen Green, spoke to his character, but then Jane Hilton's children stepped forward, each giving harrowing victim impact statements. Heather described how her life was shattered, how the unanswered why would haunt her forever. Argath, Jane's fourth child, stared directly at Green, asking what he would say if his mother had been stabbed 29 times. "What would you do if you got a call saying your mother was dead?" she asked. She then described the surreal pain of having to collect her mother's belongings from the home where she was brutally killed. "We'll always have something in common," she said. "We both regret the stupid decision you made 30 years ago." Ian, Jane's son, broke down in tears as he spoke about how suspicion had fallen on his own sister, Autumn. For years, she'd lived under a cloud of false accusations, nightmares, and trauma. When she finally spoke, Autumn detailed how detectives once accused her of biting her own mother and moving her, body accusations made only hours after Jane was found murdered. "I said the word lawyer," she recalled. "If I hadn't, I don't know how far their intimidation would have gone." Deputy District Attorney Jay Linden read a searing statement on behalf of the family, asking Green directly, "You beat her, you bit her, you kicked her in the face. Why?" He painted Jane as a loving mother, a woman who deserved to be remembered for more than just the brutality of her death. Defense attorney Margaret Husher argued that Green, as an adolescent, did not fully understand the consequences of his actions. She asked the court for mercy, but Judge Kingsbury stopped her mid-sentence. "The court is not going to put him on probation," she said. Linden agreed, calling the probation request offensive and a slap in the face to the family. Kingsbury then delivered her judgment. "This is the most brutal murder I've seen in 26 years on the bench," she said. She addressed the family with compassion, asking for forgiveness not for Green, but for the legal system's failures. She acknowledged their pain and expressed hope that they would one day find healing. To Green, she offered a final message: "You are the key to the answers this family is looking for. If you want a future, give them the truth." Michael Green was sentenced to 15 years to life. He remained at the El Dorado County Jail, awaiting transfer to the California Department of Rehabilitation. Restitution would be decided at a later date. Back to Ricky Davis's story. Meanwhile, Ricky Davis was released on February 13, 2020. He celebrated quietly with family over pizza. His attorney, Melissa O'Connell, confirmed that he would be eligible for more than $750,000 in state compensation, but no amount could make up for 18 years of lost freedom. Davis filed a civil lawsuit against El Dorado County, former detectives, and the sheriff's office pathologist. He sought $18 million in damages for his wrongful incarceration from May 2002 to February 2020. According to the Village Life newspaper, Davis was homeless after his release. The lawsuit was still pending as of 2022. Epilogue later that year. In September 2022, California passed Assembly Bill 2644, effective January 1, 2024. The bill prohibited law enforcement from using psychologically manipulative tactics on juveniles during interrogations. A small step forward for truth, for justice, and for those still waiting to be heard. The case of the ABC Gold Pawn Shop murders. A family torn apart in the aftermath of the brutal 1985 murder of Jane Hilton. El Dorado County District Attorney Vern Pearson has now taken a stand against the very tactics that contributed to a devastating miscarriage of justice. A new policy has been implemented in his office, one that bans the use of threats, physical harm, deception, or psychologically manipulative interrogation tactics when questioning anyone 17 years old or younger. The bill faced opposition, but Pearson, once a proponent of those aggressive methods, now urges law enforcement across the state to abandon intimidation-based interrogations. 10 years ago, I would have viewed these tactics differently, Pearson admitted, but after seeing the damage they cause, I believe it's time for change. This new stance follows growing research that reveals how law enforcement has long used deceptive tactics that presume guilt, focusing more on extracting confessions than discovering the truth. From now on, the El Dorado DA's office will reject any case where the main evidence is a confession obtained through coercion. This is a step toward ensuring that no one else is wrongfully convicted, as Ricky Davis was. Davis spent years behind bars for a crime he did not commit. When the truth finally came out, it was another man, Michael Green, who had taken Jane Hilton's life. Pearson personally apologized to Davis and to the families affected by the error. After 37 long years, justice has finally caught up with the real killer. but lives were shattered along the way. For Jane Hilton's family, there is hope that healing can begin after years of division, especially between those who believed in the innocence of their own sister, Autumn. Ricky Davis will never get back the years he lost, and Michael Green, though he lived freely for decades, destroyed not only the lives of Hilton's family and friends, but many others he encountered along the way. But justice delayed isn't always justice denied. The ABC Gold Pawn Shop murders. Come quickly, I'm afraid. 911. What's your emergency? Someone's robbing the pawn shop. My parents. My parents got shot. Where are your parents? They're dead on the ground. Please come quickly. I'm afraid. The chilling voice belonged to 9-year-old Andrew Hawkins Smith, the sole eyewitness to one of the most heartbreaking crimes in Danville, Kentucky history. It was 2013, and what should have been a routine morning at the family-owned ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop turned into a nightmare. Andrew and his 14-month-old sister, Naomi, were hiding in a closet. Outside, their parents, Michael and Angie Hawkins Smith, lay motionless on the floor, executed in cold blood. A third victim, 60-year-old broker Dan Smith, was also found behind the counter. Each had been shot multiple times in the head and torso. Officers arrived at the scene within 6 minutes. What they found was carnage, a trail of blood leading them through a scene of horror. Somehow, Andrew and baby Naomi had survived, but their lives had been irreversibly changed. Michael Hawkins Smith, 35, was a former priest and well known in the community for his integrity and generosity. He left the priesthood to raise a family with Angie, his first love. Together, they ran the pawn shop, which had become a thriving local business. On that tragic morning, Dan Smith, a regular client who bought and sold precious metals, had stopped by for a routine transaction. He was carrying a briefcase, as usual, but he wouldn't leave the store alive. Oddly, nothing was stolen. The cash register remained full. Personal belongings and the briefcase itself were untouched. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was something far more sinister. Detectives found 14 spent .22 caliber shell casings and 3 intact bullets at the scene. But without surveillance cameras, leads were few. Fortunately, a nearby dry-cleaning employee recalled seeing a suspicious silver minivan parked outside the pawn shop that morning. The driver, a large man with a thick, possibly fake beard. Michael's devastated parents struggled to comprehend what had happened, but found solace in the fact that Andrew and Naomi had survived. If it hadn't been for those kids, I don't think we could bear it, they said. Police then began examining the life of Dan Smith. He frequently carried large sums of money, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, and had stopped at another store just before arriving. At ABC Gold, Lawson's Jewelry in Harrodsburg, 10 miles northeast of Danville. Surveillance footage from Lawson's showed Dan arriving at 8:16 a.m., smiling, briefcase in hand. He greeted a clerk, visited the back of the store, and exited shortly after, unaware that he was just minutes away from being murdered. Back at the station, 9-year-old Andrew recounted the events in heartbreaking detail. He had been in the store when Don Smith arrived. Moments later, a man stormed in and demanded the briefcase. Dan handed it over without resistance, but the man shot him anyway. Andrew's father pleaded with the attacker to stop. Instead, he was gunned down. Angie screamed for Andrew to grab Naomi and hide. The children raced to the back and huddled in a closet as their mother was murdered too. I don't know who he was or why he did it, Andrew told officers, but I think it was because of the money. Andrew described the attacker as a tall man with a long, fake-looking blonde beard, matching the earlier sighting from the Rainbow Cleaner's witness. Police then turned their attention to the pawn shop's owner, Steve Dean, though he was usually present on Fridays to handle transactions with Dan Smith. He was absent that day, September 20th. The timing raised suspicions. The Danville triple murder. The pastor's secret Steve Dean was quickly ruled out as a suspect. He explained that he had developed a severe allergy that morning and had to cancel all his appointments, a story confirmed by his wife. He also didn't own a silver minivan. Investigators had no reason to hold him. He also offered insight into the pawn shop's lack of surveillance. According to Steve, the previous owner, the store, Kenneth Allen Keith, had removed the security system, and the new owners hadn't installed a replacement yet. Keith, now 48 years old and battling brain cancer, was still running another business, Gold Rush Buyers in Pulaski County, next door to Danville's Boyle County. Like Michael Hawkinsmith, one of the victims, Keith had once been a pastor. The two had been friends for 15 years, dating back to their days at a youth church camp. Michael's family often prayed for Pastor Keith's recovery, and their son, Andrew, saw him as a beloved uncle, with few leads. Investigators turned their attention to possible street cameras near the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop. One camera mounted on a nearby real estate office captured a blurry image of a silver minivan passing by at 8:45 a.m. The picture wasn't clear enough to make out a license plate, but the van had a distinctive square body that matched a witness. Description from the nearby Rainbow Cleaners. Detectives continued expanding their surveillance sweep. At 8:17 a.m., a camera at Ephraim McDowell Hospital captured the same vehicle. It was now positively identified as a silver Dodge minivan. As Michael and Angela's family organized a candlelight vigil to honor their memories, the police issued a public appeal for help. Then, on September 24th, they received a crucial phone call that it was Pastor Tracy Harrell from Warren, Michigan. He told police he'd recently spoken with his friend Kenneth Keith about the Danville murders. During that conversation, Keith became noticeably disturbed. He said he had driven to Danville that day to pick up medicine for his wife. He also expressed guilt for what had happened, admitting that he had given Michael the opportunity to purchase his old pawn shop. Keith floated a theory. Perhaps Dan Smith had been the real target. He claimed Dan came to his shop every Sunday carrying large amounts of gold and cash, possibly attracting the attention of someone who then followed him and struck. But something about the conversation set off alarm bells. Investigators began to re-examine Keith's timeline. He claimed to have visited the Good Neighbor Pharmacy that morning, and sure enough, at 9:24 a.m., surveillance footage confirmed his presence there. But there was a problem. Keith didn't resemble the killer seen on footage from the crime scene minutes earlier. He wasn't wearing the green jacket or the beard witnesses had described. Still, the gap between Andrew Hopkinsmith's 911 call and Keith's appearance at the pharmacy was only 7 minutes. The drive from the pawn shop to the pharmacy. Just 5 minutes, it was possible. Then came a breakthrough. Kenneth Keith owned a silver 2008 Dodge minivan, and while this alone wasn't enough to make an arrest, it put him squarely back in the crosshairs. Investigators enlisted Pastor Tracy Harrell to help. He agreed to participate in a series of monitored phone calls. During those conversations, Keith let his guard down. He began referencing details of the crime that hadn't been released publicly. He admitted he drove back to Somerset afterward and took his van to the car wash in preparation for a family vacation. Security footage from the car wash showed Keith walking to the register with a wide smile. At 11:25 a.m., external cameras caught his silver Dodge minivan leaving the property, its shape and details matching the earlier surveillance captures. The case was finally coming together, police offered Keith a polygraph. His response was chilling. He said he couldn't pass one because during his military service, he had eliminated 3 individuals. Detectives obtained a warrant to search his pawn shop. What they found changed everything. Inside were bundles of cash, some bearing ribbons from the same bank that Dan Smith used. Investigators later confirmed that the money had been withdrawn from the account of a recently deceased broker. They also discovered a fake beard similar to the one worn by the killer and several .22 caliber shell casings. Ballistics testing showed they matched the weapon used to murder Michael and Angela Hockensmith. On that evidence, Kenneth Allen Keith was arrested and charged with 3 counts of murder and first-degree robbery. His motive: revenge. Keith had come to believe that Michael and Steve Dean had conspired to push him out of his pawn shop business. He knew Dan Smith often carried large sums of cash and used that detail to stage the murders as a robbery. But there was no plot, no conspiracy. Michael and Steve had done nothing wrong. On the morning of September 20th, Keith arrived in Danville in his silver Dodge Caravan. He circled the shop until he spotted Dan Smith's car. First, he killed Dan, then Michael, then Angela. He took the cash and calmly drove away, stopping at the pharmacy to establish an alibi, then going to the car wash to destroy evidence. In 2017, just before his trial, Kenneth Allen Keith pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, as a final blow to those who once trusted him. Medical records later revealed that Keith had never been diagnosed with a brain tumor. It had all been a lie. A man once seen as a spiritual guide had orchestrated one of the most senseless and calculated triple murders in Kentucky's history. The murder of Jody Sanderholm, a stalker's final move from a young age. Jody had to passions, dance, and academic excellence. She wasn't the type to let one overshadow the other. A dedicated student and gifted performer, Jody was one of 4 valedictorians in her graduating class at Ark City High School. During her high school years, she was a standout, a member of the National Honor Society, a Kansas State Scholar, and a Kansas Board of Regents Scholar. She even received the Outstanding Physics Student of the Year award, presented by teacher David Steiney. Jody danced on the Ark City High School team for all 4 years, serving as captain for 2 of them. By 2007, she was not just dancing, she was leading. Jody had become both a member and an instructor at Ark City Dance, and she was also working as an instructor for the Universal Dance Association. After graduation, she enrolled at Cowley College, studying pre-pharmacy. There, she joined the Cowley Tiggerette dance line, continuing to choreograph and perform with passion and precision. In 2007, Arkansas City, Kansas, had a population of just around 12,000, a quiet town, safer so it seemed. Like many parents in Ark City, Jody's mother and father believed it was a good place to raise a family. But on January 5th, 2007, that sense of security shattered. That morning, Jody drove her Dodge Stratus to Cowley College for a dance team rehearsal. It was scheduled to finish by 10:45 a.m., after which she planned to head straight home. But Jody never returned. Her mother, Cindy, began to worry when Jody didn't answer her calls, something extremely out of character. Jody always kept in touch. Even if she missed a call, she would text or call back. Feeling uneasy, Cindy left work early and rushed home. When she arrived, her concern deepened. Jody's car wasn't in the driveway. Inside the house, her mother noticed something else. Jody's dance uniform hadn't been washed, and the shower stall was dry despite the fact that Jody always showered after dance practice. No sign of her, no explanation. She hadn't contacted her father or her sister, Jennifer. She had a noon appointment she never showed up for. Her parents called her friends, hoping for answers. None of them had seen her since she left practice. That night, Jody was supposed to perform at a basketball game with the Tiggerettes. She was the choreographer for the routines. She would never have missed it willingly. At 6 p.m., with no sign of their daughter, Cindy and Brian Sanderholm called the police. The response was immediate. Flyers were printed. An APB was issued for Jody and her car. The sheriff's office interviewed her friends and classmates. One name began to emerge again and again. Justin Thurber, Jody's best friend, Lori Leglighter, gave police crucial information. The 2 girls had danced together for years and were now studying at Cowley College. Lori told detectives that, just a few nights earlier, on January 2nd, She noticed a light blue car circling the sirloin stockade where she worked. When she left for home, she realized the car was following her. To test whether it was just coincidence, Lori began turning down random streets. The car stayed with her. Terrified, she drove to the local police station and parked beside it. The car disappeared. She sat for a while, then drove home only to see it again. She circled back to the station. The driver finally vanished. Lori didn't report it right away. She chalked it up to a prank, but she now believed it was anything. But on the morning Jody disappeared, Lori saw that same car again, a light blue Cadillac parked near the Cowley College lot. She and Jody had arrived at rehearsal around the same time, and Lori immediately recognized the man behind the wheel. It was 23-year-old Justin Eugene Thurber. Lori didn't know him personally, but had seen him before. He was a local, often hanging around his older brother and other guys in town. That day, she and Jody left practice together and agreed to meet up later. Jody never showed. Soon, other dance team members confirmed it. They had also seen Thurber parked in his car near the college several times that week, just sitting, watching by. Then, 24 hours had passed, and police still hadn't located Jody or her car, knowing that Arkansas City was surrounded by vast fields and wooded terrain. Authorities used fixed-wing aircraft to search from above, hoping to spot her car, which would be more visible than a person on foot. They also traced the last ping from Jody's cell phone. It had connected to a tower near the Cowley State Fishing Lake Wildlife Area, large, heavily wooded region near the Arkansas River. At this point, Justin Thurber was the only serious person of interest, and his record didn't help his case. Despite being only 23, Thurber was well known to local law enforcement. In 2004, he'd been charged with illegal possession of controlled substances. He received a suspended sentence, but was arrested again, just 3 months later for theft and violating probation. In October 2005, he was charged with disorderly conduct. 3 months after that, another arrest, another drug charge. Then, on December 31st, 2006, just 6 days before Jody vanished, Thurber was arrested again for theft. He made bail the same day, $3,000, and the next day, on New Year's Day, he was back to disturbing the peace, this time impersonating a police officer. When officers responded, Thurber claimed to have chest pains and was taken to a hospital instead of jail, for reasons that remain unclear. He was not arrested after being discharged. Some suspected family ties to the Cowley County Police may have helped him, but that was only a rumor. On January 6th, the day after Jody disappeared, a police officer spotted Thurber's Cadillac parked outside his parents' home and decided to question him. His father answered the door and invited the officer in. When asked about his whereabouts the previous day, Thurber claimed he'd driven to Winfield, a nearby town about 13 miles away, to meet with a friend and his girlfriend, but details didn't add up, and soon his story would unravel. The murder of Jody Sanderholm, the monster behind the smile Justin. Thurber told investigators he had simply been out for a drive. According to him, he was riding with some friends and one of their acquaintances, a man he claimed he barely knew. They roamed the countryside in a car owned by one of those acquaintances, until, he said, it got stuck on a dirt road near Cedar Vale, so Thurber said he decided to walk. He claimed he headed toward Arkansas City, roughly 30 miles away. After 6 hours on foot, cold and exhausted, he called his father to come get him. His father backed the story, saying he had picked up Justin, wet, filthy, and disoriented, near Cowley State Fishing Lake. As for his own car, Thurber claimed friends had retrieved it for him from Winfield, but something about the story didn't sit right. Investigators were skeptical, and they had every reason to be. Later that evening, detectives spoke with Alexis Schwartzel, Thurber's ex-girlfriend. They had recently ended a 3-year relationship, which she revealed turned the investigation in a terrifying direction. She told officers Justin often took her to the Cowley Wildlife Area, southeast of Arkansas City, a remote preserve. She even pointed out locations they would visit together. When Alexis learned they were investigating the disappearance of 19-year-old Jody Sanderholm, she went pale. Then, she said something chilling. Justin had once told her he'd been watching Jody since he was 13. He would peek at her while she swam in her backyard pool, and at night, he would watch from her bedroom window, waiting for her to undress. Police asked why she ended the relationship. Alexis said Justin was abusive, and his behavior had grown more disturbing over time. During sex, he would choke her, unconscious. On multiple occasions, he asked her to fight him, claiming it was the only way he could become aroused. The more she spoke, the clearer it became. Justin Thurber wasn't just involved, he was dangerous. The problem was, police still didn't have physical evidence connecting him to Jody's disappearance, but they did have something else, a reason to hold him. Late that night, January 6th, Detective Eric Ma arrested Thurber for bail revocation and suspicion of criminal trespass. Investigators had discovered that he had been on campus at Cowley College, a violation of a prior order. While Thurber asked for a lawyer, officers served a search warrant at his parents' home. There, they found the shoes he had worn the day his father picked him up. They were drying on a towel. His father admitted helping Justin wash the mud off them. Police also recovered the clothes he wore, but by then, they had been washed. The next day, January 7th, trained searchers began sweeping the Cowley Wildlife Area. They found multiple shoe prints, some matching Justin's sneakers, others smaller, belonging to a woman. When evening fell, a few searchers, acting on instinct, stopped by Cowley State Fishing Lake. That's when everything changed. Near a public restroom, they spotted muddy tire tracks and footprints. Inside a chemical toilet, they found mail addressed to Jody Sanderholm's parents. In another toilet, a pair of dance shoes, and nearby, a flip-flop sandal. The sandal matched the tread marks found earlier in the wildlife area. Searchers returned the next day, hidden beneath brush, logs, and debris. They found what no one wanted to see. Jody's naked body lay abandoned in the undergrowth. At the bottom of the lake, divers discovered her car sunken for over 3 days. Police feared the water might have destroyed any trace evidence, but forensic technicians worked tirelessly. In the driver's seat, they discovered a short hair. Mitochondrial DNA tests confirmed it almost certainly belonged to Justin Thurber. On Jody's body, forensic scientists recovered partial DNA from her right biceps and torso. While the samples were degraded, testing revealed something critical. Thurber could not be excluded as the contributor. While 99% of the population could cell tower data sealed it, Justin Thurber's phone and Jody's were pinging the same towers at the same times. On the day she disappeared, Jody's best friend, Lori Legleiter, told police she had seen Thurber in the college parking lot the day Jody vanished. Surveillance footage backed her up. It showed Thurber in his light blue Cadillac, waiting. He followed Jody out of the lot, based on the recovered mail addressed to her parents, likely placed there that same morning. Investigators believe Jody drove home, got out to check the mailbox, and was ambushed. Justin forced her into her own car, and drove off. A sneaker print matching Thurber's was found by the Sanderholm family mailbox back in the wildlife area. Investigators traced the footprints, Thurber's and Jody's, walking side by side. Then suddenly, only his continued, hers stopped. He had carried her deep into the woods. His footprints appeared again, near where her body was found. As for Thurber's alibi, it unraveled completely. All 3 people he claimed to be with on January 5th denied ever seeing him. The car stuck in the dirt road story, fabricated. When taken back to Cedar Vale, he couldn't even identify the road. Still, he offered to take a polygraph with a relative present, hoping to convince police of his innocence. It didn't work. The evidence was overwhelming. He was indicted. His attorneys attempted to argue he was mentally disabled and incompetent to stand trial, but that argument didn't hold. Thurber had graduated high school. He'd even taken college courses, thought the judge, ruled him fit to face justice. Then came the autopsy. The medical examiner testified that the injuries on Jody's body were brutal. Bruises and abrasions covered her face and torso. There were clear marks of strangulation around her neck. Her final hours had been unimaginably painful. Strangulation was ruled the cause of death. Justin Thurber told police he'd spent the day with a group of acquaintances, friends of friends he barely knew. According to him, they'd been driving around rural Kansas until the car they were in got stuck near Cedar Vale. From there, he claimed he walked nearly 30 miles toward Arkansas City. Soaked, exhausted, and alone, he finally called his father for help. His father confirmed this, saying he picked Justin up near the Cowley County State Fishing Lake. Justin's shoes were muddy, his clothes wet, left to dry on a towel when they got home. That same evening, police spoke with Alexis Schwartzel, Justin's ex-girlfriend. The couple had recently ended a troubled 3-year relationship. Alexis revealed disturbing details. Justin used to take her to the Cowley Wildlife Area, southeast of Arkansas City, a place that would soon become tragically significant. When investigators mentioned they were searching for 19-year-old Jody Sonderholm, Alexis went pale. She told them Thurber had once admitted to watching Jody since he was 13, spying on her while she swam, and even peeking into her bedroom window. She described his increasingly abusive behavior. During intimacy, Thurber would choke her until she lost consciousness. He once begged her to fight him, claiming violence was the only thing that aroused him. By January 6th, Thurber was a prime suspect. That evening, Detective Eric Mata arrested him for violating bail and trespassing after it was discovered Thurber had been on the very college campus where Jody was last seen. Despite being banned, he said little during questioning and asked for a lawyer. Police then executed a search warrant at his parents' home. They seized the wet shoes Justin had worn when his father picked him up. His clothes had already been washed, but the investigation pressed on. On January 7th, search teams combed through the Cowley Wildlife Area. They found 2 sets of footprints, one matching Thurber's shoes, the other, a smaller pair, later confirmed to be Jody's. As night fell, they paused the search. On their way out, passing the Cowley County State Fishing Lake, something told them to stop. What they found was chilling. Near a public restroom, muddy tire tracks, more footprints, and Jody's personal belongings, her wallet, ID, and social security card. Her dance shoes were discovered inside a chemical toilet. A sandal and a Tigerette jacket embroidered with her name were found nearby. From the water, police recovered a cut pair of sweatshorts, a mat, and a car seat cushion. Then came the devastating discovery: Jody's car, submerged in the lake. Nearby, beneath a pile of logs and brush, searchers found her naked body. DNA evidence confirmed the worst. A single hair recovered from her car was determined through mitochondrial DNA testing to be Justin Thurber's. DNA samples taken from her chest and arms showed Thurber could not be excluded, while 99% of the population could be. Cell phone records placed both Jody and Thurber in the same locations throughout the day she vanished. Surveillance footage showed Justin's light blue Cadillac following Jody out of the campus parking lot. Multiple witnesses reported seeing her in the passenger seat of her own car, with a large man driving up. Sneaker print matching Thurber's was found near the Sanderholm family mailbox. Investigators believe Jody had just checked the mail when Thurber confronted her. The footprints in the wildlife area told the final, silent story. Side by side at first, then Jody's prints stopped. Only his continued into the woods. Her last moments were ones of unimaginable terror. Sheila Bailey Jennings, the woman behind the House of Temptation from a young age. Sheila Bailey's world was shaped by violence and fear. Her father Manuel ruled the household with terror. He insulted and humiliated his wife and children, beating them with whatever came to hand, a belt, a stick, a chair. In fits of drunken rage, he would throw the entire family out into the cold night, locking himself inside the house. In the dead of winter, they were left with no choice but to huddle in barns or sleep in open fields, shivering through the frost. One night, during another violent outburst, Manuel hurled dishes and flower pots at his terrified family. Sheila's mother tried desperately to shield the children, but a ceramic pot struck Sheila in the head. The blow left her with a serious concussion and a scar on her temple that she spent years trying to hide beneath her thick hair. But the physical abuse wasn't the only nightmare the sisters endured. According to the memories shared years later by Sheila and her sister Lynn, their father began forcing them into sexual acts when they were still children. Their mother, they believed, knew what was happening, but she never spoke of it. The house was a prison of silence and suffering. Despite the horror at home, Sheila performed well in school. She was ambitious and determined, dreaming of one day leaving the farm behind and becoming a singer or actress in the big city. She had charisma, a striking appearance, and a beautiful voice. But dreams often die quietly when reality takes hold. At 18, Sheila left home and married, eager to start a new life. But she was denied entry to university due to low grades and had no money to move away. So she took a job as a maid at a local hotel, where her older sister already worked. Sheila's beauty drew the attention of many men. Slender, with big blue eyes and a charming smile, she learned quickly how to manipulate their desires to her advantage. In the late 1970s, Sheila met Jonathan Baxter, a young man with a small daughter from a previous relationship. The two quickly married, but the union collapsed within months. Jonathan discovered that Sheila was abusing his daughter while he was at work locking the child in closets, hitting her for crying. He didn't argue. He simply filed for divorce and threw Sheila out of his home, never looking back. What followed was a string of short-lived relationships. Sheila moved from man to man, often living off them, her pattern always the same: seduction, domination, destruction. In the early 1980s, she married again, this time to Ronnie Jennings. Their relationship was volatile from the start. Both were unfaithful. Both were prone to angry, even violent fights. Yet, somehow, the marriage limped on for over 3 years. In 1984, after one particularly vicious argument, Sheila demanded a divorce. Ronnie refused, more to infuriate her than out of any real attachment. Furious and emotionally spiraling, Sheila downed a mix of pills and hard alcohol. Then, in a drugged haze, she got behind the wheel of her car. She crashed at high speed into a tree and was found barely alive. Sheila spent over a week in a coma and suffered a major head injury. When she finally regained consciousness, she was transferred to a psychiatric facility where she remained for months. Later, she would tell her sister that one of the hospital orderlies had assaulted her while she was sedated, another violation in a lifetime of trauma. When she returned to Ronnie's house, her behavior had turned menacing. One day, during yet another argument, she stabbed at Ronnie's chest with nail scissors. He fled in fear and filed for divorce. With 2 failed marriages behind her, Sheila began seeking lovers through personal ads in the newspaper. She demanded complete control in every relationship, both in and out of the bedroom. None of the men lasted long. Then, in the mid-1980s, a photo of Sheila in the personals section caught the eye of 60-year-old Wilfred Bill Labar, a wealthy chiropractor from Epping, New Hampshire. Twice widowed, Bill lived alone on a sprawling country ranch where he raised horses. He was lonely and searching for companionship. Sheila saw her opportunity. She sent Bill provocative letters and nude photographs. He took the bait. Soon, he invited her to visit his ranch. Their relationship escalated quickly. Flattered by the attention of a beautiful woman half his age, Bill lavished her with gifts. By the summer of 1987, Sheila had moved in. though they were never legally married. Sheila began calling herself Sheila LaBar. Bill raised an eyebrow, but didn't object. Before long, she was deeply involved in his personal affairs, managing his finances, meddling in his business, and overseeing the ranch. With Bill aging and unable to satisfy her sexually, Sheila claimed he gave her permission to see other men, many of whom she brought directly into their home. One of those men was Wayne Ennis, a Jamaican national originally hired as a ranch hand. By the mid-1990s, Wayne had moved into the main house, and in 1995, he and Sheila were married. But he quickly realized he was just another puppet in Sheila's show. She continued seeing other men, openly and shamelessly. Wayne, unlike her previous lovers, fought back. He assaulted Sheila and one of her other boyfriends during a confrontation. Used to being in control, Sheila was thrown off by Wayne's resistance. She filed for divorce and sought a restraining order, claiming domestic violence. But the cycle continued. Sheila kept meeting new men and the outcomes kept growing darker. One ex-boyfriend claimed she deliberately tried to run him over with a car. Another said she almost fractured his skull. One man was left permanently scarred when she raked her nails across his face in a rage. With age, Sheila became more dangerous. She demanded complete submission, and if defied, she lashed out violently. In 2000, Bill LaBar died of heart failure at the age of 74. Officially, it was deemed natural causes, but his family never believed it. They were convinced Sheila had slowly poisoned him over the years, wearing him down until he gave her everything. Though they were never legally married, Sheila was named the sole beneficiary in Bill's will. His children tried to contest it in court but failed. They remain certain to this day Sheila manipulated, controlled, and ultimately destroyed their father, now the sole owner of the estate. Sheila renamed the ranch the House of Temptation, and from this point forward, what happened behind its walls would take an even darker turn. Sheila had inherited everything, and now she could do as she pleased. The ranch became her kingdom, and she proudly called it her house of seduction, a place without limits, shame, or consequences. She met men everywhere, on the streets, in bars, even online. Her lure was always the same: promises of carnal pleasure, emotional connection, and wealth. But once inside, she sought to dominate, humiliate, and control. Her preferences were broad. Age, race, and looks didn't matter. What mattered was submission. Sheila would even greet delivery drivers nude, offering alternative methods of payment. But her age was catching up to her, and her charm was no longer enough. Eventually, couriers refused to deliver to her address entirely. Meanwhile, neighbors noticed the constant rotation of unfamiliar men arriving at the ranches. Some left the same day. Others lingered for a while, but never for long. No one really knew what happened behind those doors. Then came Michael DeLorge. Michael was a vulnerable, homeless man struggling with addiction. In 2004, Sheila met him on the street and saw the perfect opportunity. She promised him shelter, food, and drugs, everything he needed to survive. In exchange, she demanded complete obedience. Once he moved to the ranch, he became her captive. She beat him, tied him up, and degraded him for her own pleasure. Michael tried to escape multiple times, walking miles and hiding in shelters. But each time, Sheila tracked him down and dragged him back. Eventually, he managed to contact family, hinting at the hell he was enduring. But before they could intervene, vanished on October 2005. Michael DeLorge disappeared without a trace. When his worried family reached out to Sheila, she claimed he had left her, and she had no idea where he went. Police showed little interest after all. Michael was a drug addict, a transient. Sheila remained untouched, her lies accepted at face value. But finances were tightening. Her claims of wealth were mostly a facade. Maintaining the ranch, the car, and her extravagant habits required income, so she turned to work that suited her best: erotic phone services. With her hypnotic voice, She lured lonely men with fantasies, often convincing them to meet her in person. That's how she met Kenny County. Kenny was 24, physically attractive but intellectually vulnerable. He had a low IQ and was extremely trusting. Sheila zeroed in on that. She quickly seduced him and persuaded him to leave his mother, his only real support system. To Kenny, it felt like love. He told his family he had found the one and moved in with her. But once inside the ranch, reality turned into a nightmare. Sheila turned a room into a torture chamber. Intimacy was replaced by violence burns, bruises, scratches, even what looked like healed bone fractures. Kenny became a prisoner. She isolated him, cut off his communication, and monitored everything. Neighbors began noticing Kenny's deteriorating condition: sickly pale, disoriented, visibly injured. A local store clerk even took a photo of him just days before his disappearance. In the image, Kenny's face was gaunt, one eye blackened, and his nose was clearly broken. He looked haunted. In his cart, 2 large gas canisters, his own cremation fuel. Disturbed by his appearance, the store staff alerted police about suspected domestic violence, but Sheila slipped through again. No charges. Then Kenny went silent. His mother arrived at the ranch and was met with hostility. Sheila insisted Kenny had left, blaming his fear of his mother. She even played a strange audio recording where a man, presumably Kenny, mumbled that his mother had attacked him. It felt rehearsed, still suspicious. An officer returned and obtained a search warrant. When authorities arrived, Sheila was gone, but in the yard, several fires were burning near the outbuildings. They were crude, fueled by mattresses, hay, broken furniture, all doused in accelerant. In one of them, police found bones. Human bones. Reinforcements arrived. What they discovered went far beyond their worst fears. Blood traces were found throughout the house, enough to suggest a massacre. Forensics confirmed the blood came from at least 3 different individuals. The charred remains in the fire were positively identified as Kenny County. Lying nearby were the same fuel cans he had purchased days earlier. But that wasn't all. Another body was found buried on the property: Michael DeLorge, the homeless man who vanished years before. And near the main house, forensic teams found something even more disturbing: dismembered fingers. They belonged to a third, unidentified male. Sheila LaBear had created a house of horrors, hiding in plain sight. Behind the gates of her rural New Hampshire ranch, she lured the lost and vulnerable only to dominate, torture, and destroy. And now, the truth was finally starting to burn its way into the light. Among the many disturbing discoveries at Sheila LaBear's ranch, police recovered a large collection of personal items: clothing, shoes, and accessories, all sized for adult men. These were pulled from a sump on the property, and the fate of the men they once belonged to remains a haunting mystery. When officers arrived at the property, Sheila was nowhere to be found. Sensing that her time was up, she had already fled. Sheila hitchhiked her way to Boston, likely hoping to disappear into the anonymity of the city. Along the way, she seduced a driver who offered her a place to stay, but her plan to vanish unraveled quickly. The next day, the man recognized her face on the news as a wanted fugitive and called police. Authorities arrested Sheila in his bed. Back at the ranch, a further chilling discovery was made: a box of videotapes. The recordings showed her victims, including Kenny County and Michael DeLorge, making disturbing confessions to various crimes. But their bruised, broken appearances and fearful expressions made it obvious. These weren't confessions. They were forced declarations made under duress, most likely during torture, segment, court, and mental health after her arrest. Serious questions arose about Sheila's mental health. The court ordered a full psychiatric evaluation. The results confirmed that Sheila suffered from a delusional disorder and showed signs of schizophrenia. During interviews, she made bizarre claims, referring to herself as an angel sent from heaven, on a divine mission to destroy men who harmed children. Her defense attorney leaned heavily on these diagnoses. He painted Sheila as a deeply damaged and mentally ill woman who lacked full awareness of her actions. The defense argued that her crimes stemmed from years of trauma, including a horrific car accident years prior that had left her in a coma. According to Sheila, that brush with death was when she met God, who allegedly tasked her with a mission to cleanse the world of predators. But testimony from those who knew her told a different story. Sheila's ex-husbands and past lovers described her not as a delusional martyr, but as a violent, manipulative woman capable of extraordinary cruelty. One of her ex-husbands, Wayne Annis, even testified that Sheila had tried to convince him to murder her previous partner in exchange for his property. Despite her claims of insanity, the evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors proved that Sheila was fully aware of her actions and had methodically planned her crimes. In July 2008, she was found guilty of the murders of Michael DeLorge in Kenny County. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. All of her appeals were denied. Today, Sheila LaBear serves her sentence at the Homestead Correctional Institution in Florida. Many of Carmen's friends and family believed that, despite separating, she and Brad still maintained a decent relationship, if only for the sake of their son, Jack. But behind the scenes, that friendship was becoming strained. They mostly interacted for Jack's benefit, and even those moments were increasingly tense. Brad, still working as a construction engineer, began dating someone new in May 2009. The relationship quickly progressed, and he got engaged. Meanwhile, Carmen returned to working in a gentleman's club to support her son. This deeply upset Brad. He believed that the mother of his child should not be involved in what he viewed as dubious work. The disagreement drove a wedge between them. Tensions escalated. Carmen issued ultimatums. Brad ignored her. Eventually, Brad remarried and was preparing to become a father again. But with his new financial obligations, the amount of child support he was paying Carmen was directly impacted. It became the final straw in a long series of arguments. On March 19, 2010, police were called to Carmen's house following a domestic incident. Carmen had reportedly attacked Brad during another heated argument. She received a formal warning from police. From that point on, the relationship between them fully collapsed. Every conversation became a battle of them, discussing which school Jack should attend turned into a war of words. On June 29, 2010, Brad came to Carmen's house again. He wanted to formalize a new child support agreement and discuss Jack's schooling. Carmen was furious with the document. She screamed at Brad and ordered him out. As he left, she shouted after him, claiming Jack wasn't even his son. 2 weeks later, Brad attempted to reach Carmen again, but she never responded. On July 13, 2010, he reported Carmen Thomas missing. Police launched an investigation. They collected CCTV footage and canvassed the neighborhood to reconstruct her last known movements. A surveillance camera had captured Carmen at a nearby supermarket on June 29, the last day she was seen alive. When police searched Carmen's rented house, they noted something odd: her outdoor garbage bin was missing. Inside, they found small but significant traces of blood on the front door, on the washing machine, near the sink, and in the bathroom. Investigators used luminol to detect hidden traces of blood. It glowed in patterns on the bathroom floor, and door-clear signs that someone had been seriously injured, possibly killed. A key witness, the landlady, told police she heard loud screaming and crying coming from the house on June 29th. Concerned, she knocked on the door. No one answered. She peered through the window and saw an overturned drying rack and the missing trash bin oddly placed inside the house. As she watched, Brad Callahan emerged from the house carrying a bundle of soiled clothes. He appeared freshly showered and quickly explained that Carmen had vomited blood following a medical procedure. The landlady, uncertain but with no reason to disbelieve him, didn't call the police. The investigation continued. Carmen's cell phone drew attention. Texts were still being sent regularly from it, but something was off. The language and tone were different from her usual style. The last message was sent on July 10th. Then, a breakthrough. Police found Carmen's car. Inside were her suitcase, clothes, and personal belongings, some stained with blood. A note was discovered, indicating she owed money to the agency where she had worked. In the glove compartment, an envelope marked with the name Misty contained $270. Detective Mark Benefield, one of the lead investigators, began to consider the grim possibility that Carmen had been murdered. Police expanded their search to the countryside southeast of downtown Auckland, after reports that her car had been spotted in the area, but initial searches turned up nothing. Examining Brad and Carmen's phone records revealed something critical. Both phones had remained in close proximity during the time she was missing. Despite messages allegedly from her claiming she had traveled to Hamilton, her phone had never connected to a Hamilton cell tower. It had been local all along. Attention returned to the missing trash bin. A neighbor recalled seeing it through Carmen's window the day she disappeared. Why would it have been brought inside? Investigators took a closer look at Brad. They reviewed his spending records and found a suspicious transaction from June 30th. He had purchased a cleaver, a large plastic container, and multiple trash bags. Then, a disturbing pattern emerged. On a regular workday, Brad arrived unusually early at the construction site. He was seen walking alone around the property, acting out of character. Nothing too overt, but enough to raise suspicion. In hindsight, at this point, Brad Callahan was no longer seen as a concerned ex. He was now the prime suspect in the disappearance, likely murder of Carmen Thomas. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with murder and attempting to pervert the course of justice. He pleaded not guilty. The arrest coincided with the birth of his second son, plunging the young father into emotional turmoil. But that didn't stop the investigation from moving forward. Just 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down. He confessed. He led police to Carmen's burial site. Brad had thought he was clever. He believed he had created the perfect cover story. Carmen had gone to Hamilton and vanished. He was confident no one would uncover the truth, but guilt, pressure, and mounting evidence cracked him. During questioning, he described what happened that day. After Carmen shouted that Jack wasn't his son and threw him out of the house, Brad walked away, but only briefly. 5 minutes later, he returned, grabbed a baseball bat, and struck Carmen in the head. She collapsed immediately. Blood splattered across the floor. The room was filled with the sound of his ragged breathing. Brad stood over her body, his face twisted in fury. He had just crossed a line he could never come back from. Brad Callahan and Carmen Thomas had long since separated, but many of their friends still believed the two shared a decent friendship. In truth, the only real bond that remained between them was their son, Jack. Their occasional meetings were strictly for matters concerning him, and over time, tensions began to rise. Brad continued his work as a construction engineer, and in May 2009 began a new romantic relationship, eventually becoming engaged. Meanwhile, Carmen was focused on raising Jack and returned to work at a gentleman's club, a decision that upset Brad deeply. He believed the mother of his child should not resort to what he considered a dubious line of work, and this disagreement soon ignited a series of arguments that unraveled what little civility remained between them. The situation escalated quickly. On March 19, 2010, police were called to Carmen's home following a domestic violence incident. Carmen had attacked Brad during yet another argument. Though she only received a warning, the relationship had officially deteriorated beyond repair. Every issue involving Jack, from school choices to financial support, became a new battleground. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss child support and sign a new written agreement. But the conversation took a dark turn. Carmen rejected the agreement and furiously told Brad to leave, screaming that Jack wasn't even his son. Brad stormed out, but only for 5 minutes. According to his later confession, Brad returned, gripped by rage. In a violent outburst, he struck Carmen in the head with a baseball bat. The force of the blow rendered her unconscious as blood pooled on the floor. Overwhelmed, Brad knew he had crossed a line that could never be undone. But instead of calling for help, he delivered more blows, acts of pure fury. He later claimed it was the culmination of years of conflict, rejection, and bitterness. For a moment, he felt he had solved a problem. Jack, he believed, was now his and his alone. Afterward, Brad calmly showered and left the house. In the following days, he began a chilling cover-up. He contacted a friend and arranged a meeting outside a supermarket, asking him to purchase black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning supplies. Brad wanted to avoid suspicion, so he waited outside while his friend shopped. Brad returned to Carmen's apartment and meticulously cleaned the scene. He wrapped her body in plastic and wheeled it out in a trash can. Over the next few days, he dismembered Carmen into 8 parts, severing her limbs at the joints and separating her head and arms from the torso. On July 3rd, Brad met another friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay and confessed to the murder. He begged for help disposing of the body, but when the friend refused to provide a boat, the plan fell apart. Instead, Brad drove to Waitakere Ranges in West Auckland, where he buried Carmen's remains in a shallow grave hidden in plastic containers. 4 days later, on July 7th, Brad drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He packed her suitcase with personal items to make it seem like she'd run away, but mistakenly left bloody clothing inside. To continue the ruse, Brad sent text messages from Carmen's phone, telling her friends she was unwell and needed space. But the tone of the messages was off. Her friends immediately noticed. The texts didn't sound like Carmen at all. On July 13th, after failing to contact Carmen for weeks, Brad reported her missing. Investigators began to reconstruct her final days using CCTV footage, phone records, and witness statements. Surveillance footage confirmed Carmen was last seen on June 29th near her home. When police searched Carmen's house, they noticed the trash can outside was missing, odd for a residential home. Inside, luminol tests revealed blood on the bathroom door, the washing machine, and the shower. The landlady recalled hearing screams and crying on June 29th, and even saw Brad leaving the house carrying soiled clothes. He told her Carmen had vomited blood after a medical procedure. He looked freshly showered. She believed him and didn't alert the authorities. Investigators discovered Carmen's suitcase in her abandoned car inside were her clothes and traces of blood. There was also an envelope labeled Misty with $270 cash. By then, suspicion had fully turned toward Brad. Police scrutinized his bank records and noticed several unusual purchases made shortly after Carmen disappeared: cleaning supplies, garbage bags, and a large plastic container. His behavior at the construction site was also strange. One day, he arrived hours early and walked alone around the property, raising quiet concern among his co-workers. On September 21st, 2010, Brad Callahan was arrested and charged with murder and attempting to pervert the course of justice. He initially pled not guilty. Just 9 days later, after the birth of his second son with his new partner, Brad broke down and confessed. He led police to Carmen's burial site in the Waitakere Ranges. Forensic teams recovered her remains dismembered and stored in plastic containers. The autopsy confirmed that Carmen died from multiple blunt force head injuries, one of which caused a fatal skull fracture. On October 13th, Carmen's family held a private funeral at Green Lane Christian Center. Little Jack, who had waited for weeks to see his mother again, was left to kiss the white casket of the woman who brought him into the world. On February 8, 2011, Brad's first court hearing took place. Judge Venning acknowledged that Brad had acted in a fit of rage, but was unrelenting in his criticism of the calculated efforts to cover up the crime. On November 25, 2011, Brad Callahan changed his plea to guilty on both charges of murder and attempting to pervert justice. The judge called it one of the most serious cases of attempted perversion of justice there can be. Brad was sentenced to life in prison, with a non-parole period of 13 years and 8 months. He was also given 6 additional years for obstruction of justice, to be served concurrently. In the courtroom, Carmen's family watched in silence. Her mother, Teresa Scott, delivered a heartbreaking impact statement. "I feel completely destroyed. I could forgive someone for taking a life under certain circumstances, but never for stripping a body and hiding it in containers." Detective Inspector Mark Benefield, who led the investigation, praised the work of his team, stating that justice was only possible thanks to hundreds of hours of detailed police work. He did not rule out future charges, but was resolute in saying that Brad's guilty plea had spared the family the agony of a long trial. Today, Carmen's son Jack lives under an assumed name in the care of his grandmother. He does not know that his father killed his mother, and for now, he must never know, because none of this was ever his fault.